All right, today we're in for a treat on the Wilderness Reboot podcast. I'm Mark Adamski, your host. And again, Wilderness Reboot is a transitional support community, particularly and exclusively designed for wilderness therapy alumni. Today we have our first guest on the show, who's actually a wilderness therapy alumni, Carson McCord. And we're so excited to have you, man. What's up?
Yeah, not much. Thank you for having me. I think this is my second or third speaking thing that I've done, with my mom's background in the book and whatnot. And so like I said in the past, these things, kind of humble me and keep me in the right perspective and the right mindset. So I'm blessed to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. We're so grateful to have you. And I think what you're doing and your story is just really encouraging to a lot of folks going through wilderness therapy and coming out. And we can't wait to hear your story. And it's pretty awesome. So, I think to start, go ahead and introduce yourself, to your level of comfort, as vulnerable as you want to be. Kind of share your story, and kind of tell folks, how you got into wilderness therapy, what was going on, and we'll kind of maybe start there. That's cool.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm 21 right now. And yeah, so my experience with wilderness therapy came about in 2019, late 2019. I was a student at Blue Ridge Therapeutic Wilderness. Um, and prior to that, I had no clue what it was. I think leading up to that, it was a lot of substance abuse, depending on those to self-medicate and deal with what we didn't know at the time was just underlying issues like that. The substances weren't necessarily my problem. It was how I was trying to help and cure my problem. And so, yeah, throughout high school, in and out of rehabs, residentials, and kind of doing stints of sobriety here and there, I think. But I was still not ready myself personally. I was still trying to cheat the system or white knuckle it, as they say. And so each time I went back to residential, I learned something. I always obtained information, which was helpful, and I think it was more helpful for me in the end. I didn't know in the moment that it was going to be helpful information, but so I went first to residential treatment after a bender on some drugs my sophomore year of high school, and that was my first kind of experience with therapeutics and substance abuse recovery. So it was the first I was hearing of all the 12-step languages, or the terms and the things that these people use. And at that point I was 16 and totally not on board. I think
Sure.
It was my parents. Yeah, exactly. And so it was something that was voluntold, in a way. My parents it was the first stint that they have dealt with anything like this. And of course I was denying everything. I didn't think anything was a problem whatsoever. So that first time we gave it, I think I was inpatient for 2 weeks, then an outpatient where I was there for 12 hours a day, but would sleep at home. I did that for a week or two, and then I did IOP.
And for folks who don't know what IOP is, that's intensive outpatient, right?
Yeah, okay, intensive outpatient. So that's it. It was 3 nights a week after school for 3 hours.
Wow, so you did all that before wilderness, huh? Because that was at age 16, and then 19 was when you later went to Blue Ridge, right?
Yeah, so I did that when I was 16, so I was sophomore year of high school, and then junior year of high school, I did that whole thing again, and that whole process, because I had gotten into some legal trouble at home. I was, me and my dad got into an altercation while I was, under the influence, and so me being very stubborn, the cops came into my house. They said hey, you can either agree to go to rehab again, or we're taking you to jail. and me being very stubborn, and like my mindset, my thought process in that moment was like, okay, well, I feel like this is my first charge. Like, I'm gonna get out of jail faster so I can continue to use quicker than I would be able to do rehab. It turns out that I went to jail, and then the lawyer was able to get like the things expunged from my record and whatnot on the agreement that I went to rehab. So where I thought I was avoiding rehab, I ended up getting both.
Yeah.
Which is something I can like laugh about now because it's like it's part of my past, and it's my personal history, and so like it, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger in a sense. So
Totally.
it is what it is, and it's a big part of where I came from. So yeah, so sophomore year, throughout my high school career, if you will, like the drug use, yeah, escalated. I think it started with weed, and by the end it was heroin. But yeah, so it happened very quickly, and I think so junior year I did it all over again. I came out of jail, and then I did, residential, outpatient IOP. I did all those over again. Um, and like I said before, yet again, I'm still learning new things. Like at this point, like I know the staff at the rehab. Like I feel like it is a safe space. And
Mm.
I think this time I'm totally what ended me up in rehab. The second time was like, yeah, my rock bottom seems to be getting worse. Like it's not just a 2-day bender off of Xanax where I didn't know what I was doing. It's like I'm seeing the the legal repercussions of my actions, and so I think there was more of me, more motivation and more engagement in me in the second time around. Um, and then yeah, living life on life's terms. I think like I got around IOP time, I got this ache of like, yeah, I'm not ready. Kind of lying to myself, lying to the people around me. Um, drinking to avoid drug tests, things like that. So it was every way,
Yeah.
shape, and form that I could, avoid the repercussions of my actions that I would try to do. And so yeah, I'm not sure. Like things just weren't sticking, and then ultimately, 2019, I after my relapse from the second time, like I had gotten really deep into opiates and started using heroin, and um, yeah, over my head in that, and I think like during that, like I knew, I would consider myself a pretty competent person, so like I knew like these decisions weren't healthy for me, and I think it's just that's the disease of addiction. It's like
Mm.
you're destroying relationships, um, you're physically not well, mentally not well, and it's just like it's kind of weighing risk and benefits, and when you're struggling in active addiction, the risks don't seem as meaningful.
Yeah, totally.
Um,
That's a good insight.
so I ended up overdosing on heroin, and then went back into rehab because my parents were like, okay, no way you're going home now. Like, so they put me back into for the third time, the rehab that I had been, regularly coming back to every year or so, 6 months. Um, but it wasn't. We knew like something wasn't working. Like residential, like great place, great staff, and we're missing something here. So it was more just kind of a placement, a safe space to keep me until we can figure out what else we're gonna do. And that's when we started researching more dual diagnosis programs, more
Mm.
long term. And to be fair, like wilderness isn't all that long term. It's longer than my stints in residential work. But
Sure. Mm.
so we landed on, and it was kind of, I don't even know if at that time I was ready, but like I knew that like my parents were set in stone on where they're at, and so it was like, yeah, I'm not like, do I want to go to another place after this rehab? But like, it's a no, but it's gonna happen anyways. So like, what? Um, so then they put it on me kind of in a way. So I was working with my therapist in residential while they were doing their own research at home, and we were looking for something that would pertain to me. I kind of had this choice of kind of picking the next place. Obviously, financials are a big thing.
Yeah.
Location. We knew that we needed to get me out of like the people, places, and things. So somewhere in Indiana or Indianapolis, which is where I grew up, um, was not going to be the case. So I found wilderness therapy, and it was, I think I glorified it in my head, and it was like, yeah, backpacking and camping and hiking and all these cool things wrapped
Yeah.
into therapeutic. So it seemed really great to me, and ultimately, like, it saved my life. It is a very great thing, and I
Hmm.
think initially I was playing it to myself as like, okay, I'm checking a box for what my parents need me to do, and ultimately what I want to do for myself, which is find out why I'm doing the things I am, and how they're affecting me. So the therapeutics of it all, and then I also played in the aspect of like, okay, but I get to be in this cool environment. So I was
Right.
kind of picking my battles in a sense. It was like, okay, if they're going to make me do this, then this is what I want to do.
So there was a draw. There was an appeal to the wilderness aspect. Had you known about wilderness therapy before that time,
No,
or knew anything about it, or seen anything?
no, I think the first time I ever heard of, or yeah, wilderness therapy was in my therapist's office at residential, like probably like 1 month before I ended up going to Blue Ridge.
Hmm.
Um, so knew nothing about it. I think I was kind of glorifying it in my head, like, oh, like I don't have to. From what I had been doing is like being inside all the time, going
Yeah.
from meeting to meeting, or doing a thing. It was like, okay, this is, it's kind of like a vacation in a sense. And so that's, ultimately went off to Blue Ridge. We landed on Blue Ridge, um, therapeutic wilderness in northern Georgia. Um, and yeah, that's kind of how my first 2 weeks played out. Is like, they kept people, my group members and the staff kept saying like, okay, why is Carson so happy to be here? When most people aren't. And I think it was because I was there for the wilderness aspect of it, and I haven't totally dived into the therapeutics of it all. And so it was more like I was kind of viewing it as this vacation, this really cool experience, which it is. Like, it really is. And then, okay, the third week comes, and that's when, like, you start getting hard, like, not easy to hear news from letters home, or you read your intervention letter, or which is what they
Sure.
call it at my program that I work for, um, and all these things, like, and ultimately, like, what I thought would be like a breeze. Like, I spent 3 months in the wilderness, and it was one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life, but for the better.
Well,
Um,
So,
yeah.
so question. So it's interesting that, like, you mentioned when you first got there, and in some way you were viewing it as kind of a vacation,
Right.
kind of meeting some of those needs to kind of take space in a wilderness setting. Like, and I could be wrong, but most, and going back to maybe some of the group members you had, were most of them coming to wilderness for the first time? Because you at this point had kind of three go arounds, right, with
Mm-hmm.
treatment and intensive, outpatient and IOP.
Right.
Um, what was that? Was that something that you noticed with group members? It was maybe like their first time coming to a
Mm-hmm.
treatment. Yeah.
Yeah. I think. Yeah, you're totally right. And I think the way I ultimately went about it is like very bizarrely different from everybody else's. Like, what seems like everyone else's initial, experience with wilderness. I think it's like, yeah, yeah. So like most of my group members, like, yeah, this was their first time with, ever trying to intervene with whatever they were dealing with, right? Um, or they didn't. They're inside, but like their home bodies. And I think I found this thing that suited me, like a passion of mine, way before I started using drugs, was the wilderness survival skills, the things like, living in the outdoors, the things that we do in wilderness. And so it was like
Well,
I kind of had this thing, like, I knew it was therapy, but I thought it'd be cool. Like, I enjoyed these things before in my life, and I kind of lost those passions due to, drugs and alcohol. And
yeah.
but yeah, I think you're totally right. I think a more common experience is being devastated or traumatized, or scared when you first get there, because you're so much out of your comfort zone. you're not at home, you don't have your room to retreat to, or you don't even have, I was there in the winter, you don't have walls or a heating system. Um,
Well,
and so simply like without all the therapeutics, like living out there alone is very challenging. And I think like,
right,
but that's not to say like we're never without exactly what we need at the time. We just had to learn, okay, how do we practice self-care when it's getting this cold at night? Like we have everything we need to stay happy and healthy. And so a big leap of that was like learning how to layer properly, learning you know, the connection between drinking cold water in the winter will ultimately keep your body warmer at night, or the calories, like things that like we take for granted, or the thoughts that are um, you know conscious, non-conscious for us, like are very real out there. And so it's not only the aspect of, it's kind of like we're trying to we're trying to reboot our minds to learn how to live in this and to adapt to this environment that we're totally not used to.
yeah,
And I think for me that
all that,
that process was a little easier, um, because like ultimately I chose to be there. I wasn't, as they call it, gooned, or I was 18 at the time, so I had a lot of say in going there in the first place. But I think
right,
like that doesn't take away from how challenging it was, and I think
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I think, it is challenging, but it's really rewarding. And to show yourself you can do tough things, uh, it's rewarding to overcome some of those challenges internally and show yourself that you can do more than you think. You're more capable. And so I'm also really curious about, so like you've had um, a history of treatment before wilderness, and now you get there and you mentioning week 2, week 3, there's some letters. Now maybe you're getting more feedback from the group, maybe you're getting more intertwined with the culture, maybe stepping into more leadership roles. From your previous background in these other therapeutic placements, what was different about wilderness? What, like, was there something about, because I'm sure you had groups maybe in inpatient or in your previous places.
right.
Was there something different now being in a wilderness setting, like being stripped away from, like you said, comforts in your, and more in your, in a, not in your comfort zone? Like what were the things that were different and really stood out to you about
Yeah,
wilderness?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the simple fact of doing the therapeutic work outdoors like makes it such a unique experience. But I think like what wilderness provided me, that like, because ultimately it was hit or miss like the first 3 times, and of course why I ended up in wilderness was because they were all missing. We were missing something, and I think what really made a difference about wilderness was, yeah, I think like for me it was that reconnection with a lost passion of mine, which not everybody's gonna have there, but I think the aspect of learning how to live in a group setting, learning how to assertively communicate with your peers and provide them with feedback if something's bothering you, communicating and advocating for myself or for the betterment of the group. Um, that aspect, creating, the longer I've been there, it was, yeah, more stepping into that leadership role. So like creating a group that I would want to come into, if I could do it all over again. And so like creating that community. And I think like, yeah, like of course, my therapist there, Anne, was great. She helped me out a lot. But I think the biggest impact comes from the staff you're with, 24/7.
Yeah,
Um, and they're, yeah, so like where I work now, and you know how it was when I was at Blue Ridge, it's like I think therapists out there 2 days out of the week, sometimes one, and then but you have staff constantly with you who are trained in, they have a lot of experience with communication skills, with the physical safety of living out there, the outdoor skills. But like those are the people who are with you 24/7 when you're being an asshole, or you're you know
Right,
like
showing you the love and compassion despite maybe being a
yeah
little combative or upset or getting having a bad week or a bad letter or yeah,
yeah
just going through the ups and downs with you.
hmm yeah
Yeah,
exactly. And like everybody, like every staff I've ever who's ever worked with me, and who I've worked with now in the present time, I think like they have, and we all have like such a strong empathy for our students, or for students like me, where there's totally, you don't feel judged, you feel welcomed, like they are calling you out on your BS because they care. Like it's not this sugar coated thing. Like they are there to support you in any way possible. And if that means saying the
yeah,
hard things or the things you don't want to hear, like they're gonna say it. And ultimately, like with the students I work with now, like yeah, like when a student leaves the program, like now that's what they say. They say thank you for challenging me. Like
yeah,
yes, we have fun out there. Yes, we play games and we talk about things, and but like ultimately what they remember is how much I challenged them, or how much the staff I worked with challenged me.
uh,
And so I think there's a total, you don't feel like there's a connection. How I like to put it is like the staff I work with and the staff that work with me, like everyone has been so good at disconnecting the student from our actions, right? Like
totally.
we're
It's
at
huge.
that point in my life, like I'm an 18-year-old teen, and I am, I do have my days where I'm not having it with anybody, and like,
Yeah, of course.
and then, the staff that I worked with, see that for what it is, and they say, okay, like this, this is not Carson, this is simply how he's reacting to a certain situation. So it's
Yeah,
like, but yeah, so I think the staff and then the overall group community, like living in a group setting where you guys are going through these challenges together, um, were big things for me when I was a student. As of late and as of now, I believe that like the environment and the wilderness aspect of it all like provides that necessary space away from the everyday stressors of school life, home life, relationships, and like whether you like it or not, like you have no contact with those
mm,
things, or you don't have those stresses. Um, and it just offers you a lot of space for your self introspection, or to work on your communication skills. Like everything we're doing out there in the field, or you directly correlate some way, somehow to something we'll do at home.
totally.
Like, yeah, you're living with someone 24/7, like you're not always going to get along. You're going to have arguments. You're not going to like people. Like, no one's asking you to be best friends with this person, but how can you coexist and communicate, assertively? And so those are the things that nowadays, like I really preach, because yeah, like I don't know if I saw that then, but like I definitely had that environment, and that group setting really pushed me to speak up for myself and advocate for myself. And so I think like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You said a lot of good things there, and yeah, I think it for anyone at any stage in their life to change neurological behaviors and just patterns you've had your whole life is difficult. And there's definitely a social component to that. And I wonder if like that idea that you mentioned, that therapeutic relationship where you get, difficult and hard feedback, to call it, like you said, quote unquote, the bullshit. I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if there's something different about wilderness because you're building a culture and a community and a tribe and a
Mm-hmm.
camaraderie of going through challenges together that maybe does make it different than other therapeutic settings like you maybe had before and other treatment. And I often wonder, why is it so different in that wilderness setting, that kumbaya, like that campfire,
Mm-hmm.
just that where does that magic lie? And
Right.
I think it's so cool because when you are intentional in a community and you're kind and you're safe therapeutically,
Mm-hmm.
you if everyone knows what you're working on and you're all working on maybe smaller things independently that are different, but at large trying to grow and be healthier, it's such an awesome container to be challenged, right? And to
Right.
use certain nonviolent communication like, hey, like I have a challenge for you, or like, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
noticed this, I observed this, and how to speak in a certain way that's not, getting into power struggles. And,
Mm-hmm.
for folks who are maybe having that show up in their life at home with their family or relationships, friends, it's cool to see that show up in wilderness because when you are stripped of those things, you can only hide or put a mask on yourself for so long, because in the
Right.
backcountry they say after 72 hours like it comes off, and so you
Yeah.
see that stuff show up, and then you're like, whoa, this is
Hmm.
this is the same person I was at home. Um, and it's cool when you have a compassionate staff that gets it and doesn't judge
Hmm.
you and
Hmm.
helps you through that.
Yeah.
So you were kind of in between there talking about where you're at now and referencing that. So I just want to let
Right.
folks know and let you maybe talk about that now. So, and if you want to finish more about Blue Ridge and your experience, by all means. But it sounded like after that, then you went back in this field, right? Because now
Right.
you're
Right.
a guide. You were
Hmm.
telling me.
Yeah.
And so
So
what company are you working with now?
so currently I'm working for Elements Wilderness Therapy.
Cool.
Um, And so they have an adult program, just like Blue Ridge, where I went. They have an adult program and they have an adolescent program. And I currently work with the adolescent boys. But yeah, I've been working with them for nearly 2 years now. After Wilderness, I think, on the topic of like Wilderness Reboot and what you guys are trying to do, I think like, yeah, I would say like from my experience being a student and then also being a staff, like it's pretty rare that like there's not some type of follow up. Um, Whether that be for me, it was just sober living out here in Utah where I'm at now, where I got to find that brotherhood and ultimately came from other people who were coming to sober living. Ultimately came from a lot of the same background that I did, and either had done a wilderness program or have similar struggles in the past that I had.
Yeah.
But so yeah, so that was my aftercare. I think it's rare, like simply going from like 3 months in the woods of North Carolina or the desert out in Utah, like, and then plopping back right back into society, like that's not. It can work, and it's not the best opportunity. I think like there needs to be some type of step down because simply in some type of transitional aspect of therapeutics. For me, it was like with sober living, I was getting um, more freedom and learning how to do things as an adult. But I always still had those, that support to fall back on. And I think like for someone to go 3 months, in the woods or a full stay, out of wilderness program and then pop right back into public school, like that can be a very hard transition. And so I think
Totally.
having some type of cushion in between to offer a soft landing or the skills to enact on a soft landing is definitely necessary. But yeah, so ultimately I was at um, Balance House, which is the sober living I was at for about a year, and then I was
Can
able.
I? Do you mind if I stop you right there?
Yeah, go
Because
ahead.
I want to ask a quick question about transitioning into, you said the Balance House. It
Right.
was the sober living. You said you connected with some folks who happen to have done wilderness, but maybe not all. What
Hmm.
was it like when you connected with folks who did wilderness? Were they coming from different programs, or was it like an instant rapport or connection there?
Yeah, uh, totally instant rapport. I think like
Yes, that's what
yeah,
I'm talking about. This is what I'm
totally
curious about.
yeah, for sure. And I think like because it's true, like you go through something as challenging as a wilderness program, you learn so much about yourself, so much about other people, and you're like engaged and you learn to be engaged in other people's process as well as your own. So I think like yeah, like everyone, I would say majority of the people I went to sober living with had come from a wilderness program, either here or there, and so all different programs. But I think the beautiful thing about wilderness is like it's all like I would say majority of it's pretty universal. Like I think like all the companies, all the some might be CBT or DBT, like depending on what tools they use and whatnot. But it's all kind of
Right, right.
universal, and so it's like yeah, so it's like I'm in this new place, I'm in this sober living, I'm scared, I'm anxious, I don't know anybody here, and then okay, this guy's coming in from Open Sky from Colorado, and I just came from. So it's instantly like yeah, instant rapport. You have something to talk about. You talk about the experience, you compare experiences. You're talking about like, oh, did you guys do this too, or like, what did you guys call this? What was your term for this? And it's all very universal. Like, and I think the way we do things, we're
Wow.
all very much on the same page. And so it's, yes, it made my transition so much easier. Having those people, because those are the people I spent the next year of my life with, and whatever they did after the program, like whether they went back home or ended up staying out here like I did, um, those are people that like, you're forever connected with. Like I still
Yeah.
have buddies that I went to wilderness with that like I'm still in contact with, and like I think the amount how quick we got to know each other, and what some might say like is the worst and the hardest part of our life. Um, I could talk to them. I could go without talking to them for 6 months and pick up the phone and have a
Yeah.
conversation just
It's
like
a
that.
deep connection, man. It's a deep bond. And when you're out in the middle of nowhere in the backcountry, it's just a different relationship. The mask
Mm-hmm.
comes off. Every part of you comes out, and the good, bad, and the ugly, and the fun, the goofy, the wild
Mm-hmm.
side, and it's like, and it's true for guides too. And that's what's so cool about this idea of like community, this wilderness tribe, because for me, getting back and rebooting, so to speak, and connecting with other staff or alumni, it's like even guides, from time to time want to reconnect, and like you said, you pick up right where you left off because it's an atypical relationship, and it's actually like such a blessing when you look back on it because most people can't relate to that. They don't know what that looks like they have maybe a really good work connection or staff connection, but it's like a 9 to 5. They don't really
Yeah.
see them 24/7. And I've guided for so many years, like all of my 20s, like wilderness therapy specifically, maybe 5 or 6.
Right.
But I've never as a student been, I've had a lot of field days, but never like straight up
Mm-hmm.
90 days more or less, which is where most people have their timeline. And so yeah, it's so cool to hear that and hear your thoughts here because there's something about this. Wilderness therapy in general is super niche, but there is
Mm-hmm.
a such a common place with all the wilderness programs. Maybe they have a different clinical approach, or maybe they're more base camp or nomadic. But generally
Right.
speaking, there's so many common points there, and and a lot of folks maybe financially aftercare isn't an option, and so it's cool to just give a community for people for free, just to
Right.
connect and grow.
Mm-hmm.
So you did that, and you said up to a year, more or less. I think you said you were at
Yeah,
Cal.
yeah, probably a year at Balance House, and then I kind
Okay,
of just ended up staying out in Utah. Yeah.
cool. Cruising Utah, and then so now you're with Elements, and so it's like full circle, man. And so now you're giving back, and it's so cool to hear. And your mom wrote a book, and how have things been guiding since?
Yeah, I think the my experience as a student like provides me with a lot of information, um, you know, firsthand empathy for the work I do. Um, and I don't think being a student in the wilderness is necessary to be a good staff, like whatsoever. I don't think that, but I think there is um, a benefit or alternate perspective that like can be pretty hard to see when you haven't gone through what they're going through. And I think like, and of course it's not something like working now, like I don't go and disclose that for everybody because I don't want to make it for the students, like I'm there for them. I don't want to make it about me. I want to keep the ball in their court
Sure.
and in every way I can. um, but I think having that in the back of my head of like when I'm seeing something happen in the field, or an argument, or um, yeah, trouble to connect with a certain peer, like like those are things that I can draw on from my time. Like in my head, I'm like, okay, yeah, I had this experience as well. Um, but yeah, it's been great. I started April of 2020, 2021. But yeah, so started as like an instructor, worked my way up to assistant group lead, and now I'm at a group lead position. And so I'm still, I think like there are so many other like things I could do with the company, but I think like if I am going to stay, like being in the field is where I want to be because that's where
Yeah.
personally for me like that's where the magic happens in a sense. Um, and yeah, it's been great. Um, I'm kind of at a point where I'm ready to do something different.
Yeah, you're telling me that
And
before the call.
yeah, so like yeah, now I'm looking to go do my get my wilderness EMT and kind of keep the wilderness aspect of it because
Oh,
that's a big
awesome.
part of what changed my life and adding a new aspect of the medicine. But of course I'm never going to be done with wilderness therapy. Like I'll always be involved one way or the other, whether that's coming back for what we call celebrity shifts and popping up at my program like every once in a while, or
Yeah, I know
maybe
those.
yeah,
take
maybe
a
being
take a
like
long vacation.
yeah, extra long vacation and come
Right.
back next winter or something like that. But staying just staying involved with elements specifically or doing things like this because it is part of my roots and I can't forget my roots
Yeah.
and it humbles me to do things like this and opportunities like this and but I also think in the same aspect like I'm ready to juggle some different tasks and expand my
Nice.
knowledge of expertise in a sense.
Exciting. Well, we're very excited for you, man. I wish you all the best. And yeah, it's fun to just see, there's like a reverence being a part of this stuff. That's why it's so cool meeting people because,
Mm-hmm.
they kind of get it, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
like when you connect with folks in your transition program, it's like when you connect with somebody in the wilderness, it's cool. And with that reverence there, it's like you got to give back at some point
Mm-hmm.
when you get touched by the gifts of wilderness, right? It's like, and it's always there. It's always there, when you want it and when you need it, you need to disconnect, and it's not judgmental, and it's just there, and it's so perfect. And yeah, it's so cool to connect with you, have you on, man. Hear
Mm-hmm.
your story, Carson. It's really encouraging, inspiring, and we wish you the best. To kind of finish up, do you have any advice for folks maybe considering wilderness therapy, or folks transitioning out of wilderness? Any advice? Anything you tell them?
Yeah, I would say because it's not like the way I describe wilderness is like you have some good days out there, but majority of it is really challenging hard days that and ultimately I feel like we learn more from our hard days than our good days, and so I think like yeah, whether or not you're transitioning back, just into everyday society or you're at a program, I think just like staying connected with your roots or something that I like reaching out to your therapist every once in a while and checking in. Um, because and I don't know if this is everyone's experience, but I think like ultimately like when you're out of wilderness long enough, like and you're in contact with like the people you were in, who were in your group or part of your tribe, and so it's like you end up missing it. And so like I think yeah, maintain like exactly what you guys are trying to do and raise awareness of. Like I think you got to keep those connections in your life, and I think
Yeah.
you'll realize that like the very in the grand scheme of things, a very short amount of time where that it took you and your group members or your peers in wilderness to become so close. Um, that's not a relationship that you need to really like try hard to maintain. Like there's always going to be that connection. You guys went
Always
through
there.
that together. And so I think keeping those relationships and I think yeah, just continuing to draw on your experience. Like I to this day draw from my experience in wilderness and I apply it to my everyday or like I'm out in the field now teaching like emotional regulation skills or like teaching these guys how to do it and like I'm still like I still have arguments with people that I have relationships with.
Yeah,
So it's
sure.
like always things where I can be like, yeah, I'm not perfect at this either, and I think no one is, and so just yeah, continuing to draw amongst your experiences and I think there can often be, especially coming back into society, with if you don't have those connections or those relationships, I think there can be some type of shame or guilt. Like you're going back to school and you're feeling like, dang, I was gone all summer, or I was gone all
Yeah, playing
Awesome.
catch
That's
up.
yeah. So like
A lot of folks say that when they come in, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to be gone for 3 months." Like at that age, it's a big deal, right? There's
yeah.
a lot going on at that age with your friends.
hmm
Yeah,
So I think yeah, just like yeah, staying in contact for sure. I think is the biggest thing.
yeah. So community, staying in touch, drawing from the experience. Carson, this was fun, man. I wish you all the best with the
Yeah.
WMT and just keep crushing it, man. Keep
Cool.
getting after it and stay in touch. All right.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Thank you, Mike. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity. These things, just as much as I hope they, are helpful for other people, they really help me. So I appreciate the opportunity for sure.
No doubt, man. Have a good one.
All
Talk
right.
soon.
Yep.
See ya.
Bye.